Lieutenant Sarah Martinez had always known the ocean would be her calling, but she never imagined it would lead her to this moment. Standing on the deck of the USS Constellation at dawn, watching the Pacific stretch endlessly before her, she reflected on the journey that brought her here. The salty breeze carried memories of her childhood in San Diego, where her father, a retired Marine Corps sergeant, had taught her that respect was earned, not given, and that leadership came through action, not words. Growing up as the eldest of 3 children in a military family, Sarah learned early that excuses were luxuries she couldn't afford. Her father, Miguel Martinez, had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before a roadside bomb left him with a limp and a Purple Heart. He never spoke much about the war, but Sarah saw how he carried himself with quiet dignity, how neighbors sought his advice, and how he commanded respect without demanding it. Her mother, Elena, worked double shifts as a nurse to support the family when Miguel struggled to find civilian work that accommodated his injuries. Sarah's path to the Navy began in high school, where she excelled in both academics and athletics. She was captain of the swim team, president of the student council, and graduated valedictorian. But it wasn't her achievements that impressed her teachers most, it was her ability to bring out the best in others. When the shy new student from Guatemala struggled with English, Sarah spent her lunch breaks tutoring him. When the basketball team was falling apart due to internal conflicts, she volunteered to mediate between feuding players, even though she wasn't on the team. The Naval Academy offered Sarah a full scholarship, recognizing not just her academic excellence but her leadership potential. Her father drove her to Annapolis himself, the old pickup truck loaded with her few possessions. As they stood outside Bancroft Hall, he placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. "Mija," he said, using the Spanish endearment that always made her feel loved, "they're going to test you in ways you can't imagine. Remember who you are, where you come from, and why you're here. The ocean doesn't care about your gender or your last name, it only respects those who respect it." The academy years were a crucible that forged Sarah into the officer she would become. Plebe year nearly broke her. The upperclassmen seemed particularly harsh toward the female midshipmen, and Sarah faced challenges her male classmates never encountered. During one particularly brutal inspection, a second-class midshipman found fault with everything from her shoe shine to her posture, keeping her at attention for over an hour while berating her performance. "Maybe you should consider a different career path, Martinez," he sneered. "The Navy isn't a place for little girls playing dress-up." Sarah's roommate, Jennifer Chen, found her that night sitting alone in their small room, staring at a photo of her family. "You're thinking of quitting," Jennifer observed. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, unable to trust her voice. "My dad always said the academy would separate those who belonged from those who were just visiting," she whispered. "Maybe I'm just visiting." Jennifer sat beside her friend. "Remember why you're here, Sarah? It's not to prove anything to jerks like Davidson. It's because you have something the Navy needs. I've watched you these past months. When Martinez and Alpha Company was struggling with calculus, you helped him pass. When our squad was falling apart during navigation exercises, you found a way to pull us together. You don't just want to be a naval officer, you already are one." The turning point came during a leadership exercise in their second year. Sarah's squad was tasked with navigating a complex tactical scenario while under intense pressure from instructors. As the designated squad leader for the exercise, she faced a simulated crisis where enemy forces had surrounded their position and casualties were mounting. The other squad members, playing their roles, began to panic. Some wanted to retreat, others argued for a frontal assault, and chaos threatened to overwhelm them. Sarah took a deep breath and remembered her father's words about the ocean respecting only those who respected it. In a clear, steady voice, she began issuing orders. She divided her squad into 3 teams, each with a specific objective. She assigned the most experienced member to lead the wounded to safety, sent the best marksman to provide covering fire, and led the assault team herself. Her plan was bold but calculated, risky but not reckless. The exercise concluded with their squad achieving all objectives with minimal simulated casualties. The observing instructor, Commander Patricia Walsh, approached Sarah afterward. "Midshipman Martinez," she said, "I've been watching you for 2 years. You have something that can't be taught in classrooms or learned from textbooks. You have the ability to see clearly when others are blinded by chaos, and you have the courage to act on what you see. The Navy needs officers like you." As Sarah progressed through the academy, she began to understand that leadership wasn't about commanding others, it was about serving them. She volunteered for additional training opportunities, including a summer program with the Marine Corps that pushed her physical and mental limits beyond anything she had previously experienced. During a 3-day field exercise in the mountains of Virginia, her unit got lost in dense fog. With their GPS malfunctioning and visibility near zero, panic began to set in among the younger Marines. Sarah had been assigned as an observer, not a leader, but she recognized the signs of a unit about to fall apart. She quietly approached the Marine sergeant in charge, a gruff veteran named Rodriguez who had initially been skeptical of having a Navy princess attached to his unit. "Sergeant," she said respectfully, "I've been studying the topographical maps. If we follow this ridgeline north for about 2 kilometers, we should intersect with the main trail." Rodriguez studied her for a moment, then looked at his compass. "You sure about that, midshipman?" Sarah nodded, pointing out specific landmarks she had memorized from their briefing. The sergeant made the call to follow her navigation, and 2 hours later, they emerged from the fog exactly where she had predicted. From that moment, Rodriguez treated her not as an outsider but as a trusted teammate. These experiences shaped Sarah's understanding of leadership as service. She learned that true authority came not from rank or position but from competence, character, and the ability to earn trust. She studied the great naval leaders throughout history, from John Paul Jones to Grace Hopper, learning that each had faced their own unique challenges but all had succeeded by putting their mission and their people before themselves. During her final year at the academy, Sarah served as a company commander, responsible for the training and welfare of over 100 midshipmen. It was during this time that she encountered her first real crisis as a leader. One of the plebeians under her command, David Kim, was struggling academically and socially. Coming from a small town in Idaho, he felt overwhelmed by the academy's intensity and isolated by the competitive atmosphere. Sarah noticed that Kim was withdrawing from his classmates and his performance was declining rapidly. She could have simply documented his failures and recommended his dismissal, which would have been the easier path. Instead, she invested personal time in understanding his challenges. She discovered that Kim was brilliant in engineering but struggled with the humanities courses. More importantly, she learned that he was dealing with his father's recent death and felt guilty about pursuing his own dreams when his mother was struggling financially back home. Working with Kim's academic advisors, Sarah developed a support plan that included tutoring, counseling, and a modified study schedule. She also helped connect him with other midshipmen from similar backgrounds who could provide mentorship and friendship. When Kim's mother fell ill and he considered dropping out to care for her, Sarah helped him explore military family support programs that could assist with medical expenses and caregiving. By graduation, Kim had not only survived but thrived, graduating in the top third of his class and receiving assignment to his first choice of submarine duty. At the graduation ceremony, he sought out Sarah to thank her. "Ma'am," he said, "I know I wouldn't be here without your leadership. You didn't just help me succeed, you helped me become the person I was meant to be." Sarah's commissioning as an ensign was attended by her entire family, including her father, who wore his dress blue uniform for the first time in years. As she received her commission from the academy superintendent, she saw tears in Miguel's eyes. Later, during the reception, he pulled her aside. "I'm proud of you, Mija," he said simply. "But I'm not proud of what you accomplished, I'm proud of who you've become. You understand something that took me years to learn: real strength comes from lifting others up, not putting them down." Her first assignment was aboard the USS Hampton, a fast-attack submarine based in Norfolk. Submarine duty was among the most challenging assignments in the Navy, requiring technical expertise, mental toughness, and the ability to work effectively in extremely confined spaces with the same crew for months at a time. As one of only a handful of women qualified for submarine duty, Sarah knew she would face additional scrutiny and skepticism from some crew members. The submarine's commanding officer, Commander Richard Stone, was a 20-year veteran known for his technical brilliance and demanding standards. During Sarah's check-in interview, he was direct about his concerns. "Ensign Martinez," he said, I don't care about your gender, your background, or your academy rankings. What I care about is whether you can do your job under pressure and whether your crew can trust you with their lives. Submarine duty isn't about individual achievement, it's about team survival. Prove you belong here through your actions, not your words. Sarah's first months aboard the Hampton were a constant learning experience. Submarine operations required mastering complex technical systems while developing the intuitive understanding of the boat's behavior that came only through experience. She studied relentlessly, spending off-duty hours learning every system and procedure until she could navigate the boat's maze of equipment and controls blindfolded. Her first real test came during a training exercise off the coast of North Carolina. The Hampton was simulating an attack on a surface vessel when a hydraulic failure in the torpedo room created a potentially dangerous situation. The failure occurred during Sarah's watch as the torpedo room officer, making her responsible for managing the crisis. As alarms sounded and emergency procedures kicked in, Sarah faced her first moment of command under genuine pressure. The hydraulic leak was creating a potential fire hazard while also threatening the boat's ability to surface quickly if needed. She had to coordinate the repair efforts while maintaining the boat's position and ensuring the safety of her crew. Drawing on her academy training and her instincts as a leader, Sarah calmly assessed the situation and began issuing orders. She directed 2 crew members to isolate the leak while she personally supervised the emergency shutdown of affected systems. When the repair required someone to work in a cramped, potentially dangerous space near the leak, she volunteered to do it herself rather than ordering a subordinate to take the risk. Working in near-total darkness with only a flashlight, Sarah managed to apply a temporary patch to the hydraulic line while her crew members fed her tools and monitored the situation. The repair held long enough for the boat to surface safely and return to port for permanent repairs. Commander Stone's only comment was a brief nod of approval, but Sarah knew she had passed an important test. As her submarine tour progressed, Sarah earned the respect of her crew through consistent competence and genuine concern for their welfare. She learned their names, their backgrounds, and their concerns. When Petty Officer Jackson received word that his wife was having complications with her pregnancy, Sarah worked with the command to arrange emergency leave. When Seaman Rodriguez struggled with claustrophobia during extended submerged operations, she helped him develop coping strategies that allowed him to complete his tour successfully. These early experiences aboard the Hampton laid the foundation for Sarah's philosophy of leadership. Competence was the price of entry, but connection with people was what made the difference between good and great leadership. She began to understand that every decision she made affected not just the mission but the lives and families of the sailors under her command. As her tour neared its end, Commander Stone called her into his stateroom for her final evaluation. "Ensign Martinez," he began, "when you first reported aboard, I wondered if the Navy's decision to integrate submarines was a mistake. I've seen too many officers, male and female, who couldn't handle the pressure of submarine duty. But you've proven something important, not just that women can serve on submarines, but that the best officers, regardless of gender, share certain qualities: technical competence, personal courage, and genuine care for their people." He paused, then continued. "I'm recommending you for advanced training and promotion ahead of your peers. The Navy needs officers who can think clearly under pressure and inspire others to excel. You've shown you can do both. Your next assignment will be more challenging, but I believe you're ready for it." Sarah's next assignment would take her to the surface fleet, where she would face new challenges and opportunities. But, as she prepared to leave the Hampton, she reflected on the lessons learned during her submarine tour. She had discovered that leadership wasn't about proving herself to skeptics or overcoming obstacles, it was about serving something larger than herself and helping others reach their potential. The ocean that had called to her as a child had tested her and shaped her, just as her father had predicted. She was no longer the idealistic midshipman who had graduated from Annapolis. She had become a naval officer in the truest sense, someone who understood that command was not a privilege to be enjoyed but a responsibility to be discharged with honor, competence, and humility. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez stood on the bridge of the USS Constellation, her new assignment as operations officer marking a significant step in her naval career. The destroyer was a far cry from the confined spaces of submarine duty, but the challenges of surface warfare presented their own complexities. Captain James Morrison, the ship's commanding officer, was known throughout the fleet as a demanding but fair leader who had earned his reputation through decades of exceptional service. During Sarah's first week aboard, Captain Morrison called her to his cabin for what she assumed would be a routine check-in meeting. Instead, she found herself facing one of the most direct conversations of her career. "Lieutenant Martinez," he began, settling behind his desk with her service record open before him, "your submarine tour was exemplary, and Commander Stone's recommendation was glowing. But surface warfare is different. You'll be coordinating complex operations involving multiple departments, managing relationships with other ships, and potentially directing combat operations. Are you prepared for that level of responsibility?" Sarah met his gaze directly. "Captain, I understand the challenges are different, but the principles remain the same. Whether we're operating alone underwater or as part of a surface action group, success depends on competent leadership, clear communication, and a crew that trusts each other. I'm ready to learn whatever I need to know to serve effectively." Morrison studied her for a moment before nodding. "Fair enough. But understand this, as operations officer, you'll be my right hand during complex evolutions. When we're conducting multi-ship exercises or responding to real-world crises, there won't be time for on-the-job training. You need to be ready to step up immediately." The Constellation was scheduled to deploy to the Western Pacific as part of a carrier strike group within 6 months. This deployment would be Sarah's first opportunity to serve in a potential combat zone, as tensions in the South China Sea had been escalating steadily. The ship would spend the next several months in intensive training, preparing for scenarios ranging from humanitarian assistance to high-intensity warfare. Sarah threw herself into learning every aspect of her new responsibilities. As operations officer, she was responsible for coordinating the ship's daily activities, managing the complex scheduling of training exercises, and serving as the primary liaison with other ships in their strike group. The role required her to understand not just her own ship's capabilities but how those capabilities integrated with the larger naval force. Her first major test came during a multi-ship exercise off the coast of California. The Constellation was serving as the anti-air warfare coordinator for a formation of 6 ships, meaning Sarah was responsible for managing the defensive systems that would protect the entire group from aerial threats. The exercise simulated a scenario where enemy aircraft and missiles were approaching from multiple directions simultaneously. As the simulated attack began, Sarah found herself managing a complex dance of radar systems, missile batteries, and electronic countermeasures across 6 different ships. She had to coordinate defensive fires while ensuring that friendly ships didn't inadvertently target each other, all while maintaining communication with the strike group commander and providing regular updates on the tactical situation. 15 minutes into the exercise, one of the ships in their formation reported a simulated system failure that would significantly reduce their defensive capabilities. Sarah had to instantly recalculate the formation's defensive coverage and redirect defensive responsibilities to other ships. At the same time, the exercise controllers introduced a new threat axis that required her to coordinate a complex defensive maneuver while maintaining protection for the most vulnerable ships in the formation. Working from the ship's Combat Information Center, surrounded by radar screens and communication equipment, Sarah maintained a calm, professional demeanor even as the simulated situation became increasingly complex. She coordinated defensive fires that successfully defeated the simulated attack while maintaining formation integrity and protecting all ships in the group. When the exercise concluded, the strike group commander personally commended her performance, noting that her coordination had been textbook perfect under extremely challenging conditions. Captain Morrison's assessment was more direct. "Outstanding work, Sarah," he said, using her first name for the first time since she had reported aboard. "You managed a complex situation with the kind of calm competence that separates good officers from exceptional ones. That exercise simulated some of the most challenging scenarios we might face in deployment, and you handled it like a veteran." As the Constellation prepared for deployment, Sarah faced personal challenges as well as professional ones. She had been dating Mark Thompson, a Marine Corps captain stationed at Camp Pendleton, for over a year. Their relationship had survived her submarine tour, but the upcoming deployment to the Western Pacific would mean at least 6 months of separation with minimal communication opportunities. Mark understood the demands of military service. His own career had included deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, but the uncertainty of Sarah's deployment was particularly challenging. Unlike his ground combat deployments, which had specific timelines and objectives, naval deployments could be extended without notice if international situations deteriorated. The night before the Constellation's departure, Mark drove down from Camp Pendleton to see Sarah off. They walked along the beach near the naval base, talking about their future and the challenges they would face. "I know this is what you sign up for," he said, "but it doesn't make it easier. I'm proud of what you're doing, Sarah, but I worry about you out there." Sarah took his hand as they watched the waves crash against the shore. "I worry too," she admitted. "Not just about the deployment, but about us. I've seen too many military relationships fail because of the demands of the job. But I also know that if we can't support each other's careers, we don't have much of a foundation for a future together." Mark stopped walking and turned to face her. "Sarah, I've watched you grow into one of the most impressive officers I've ever known. Your career isn't something I have to tolerate, it's something I admire. Whatever happens on this deployment, know that I'm proud to be part of your life." They spent their last evening together talking about their plans for when she returned and the possibility of coordinating their next assignments to be stationed closer together. When Mark dropped her off at the base the next morning, their goodbye was emotional but not dramatic. They both understood that this separation was part of the price of their chosen profession. The deployment to the Western Pacific proved to be everything Sarah had prepared for and more. The Constellation spent its first month conducting routine patrols and training exercises with allied navies, but international tensions were clearly escalating. Chinese military forces were conducting increasingly aggressive exercises in disputed waters, and there were daily incidents involving fishing vessels, Coast Guard ships, and military aircraft. Sarah's responsibilities expanded significantly when the strike group received orders to conduct a freedom of navigation operation through international waters claimed by China. As operations officer, she was responsible for coordinating the complex planning required to ensure the operation achieved its political objectives while minimizing the risk of military confrontation. The operation required the strike group to transit through a narrow strait where Chinese forces had been conducting military exercises. Intelligence reports indicated that Chinese ships and aircraft would likely conduct harassment operations, including close approaches, radar illumination, and aggressive maneuvering designed to intimidate the American forces. Sarah worked closely with the intelligence officers to develop a comprehensive operational plan that would allow the strike group to complete its transit while being prepared for any level of Chinese response. She coordinated with the Air Wing to ensure fighter coverage was available if needed, worked with the submarine force to position underwater assets for intelligence gathering and protection, and developed communication plans that would allow rapid coordination with higher headquarters if the situation escalated. On the day of the operation, Sarah was at her station in the Combat Information Center before dawn, monitoring intelligence feeds and coordinating final preparations. As the strike group entered the disputed waters, Chinese forces began responding exactly as intelligence had predicted. Chinese fighter aircraft began conducting close approaches to American ships, flying low over the water in what were clearly intended as intimidation tactics. Sarah coordinated the American response, ensuring that all ships maintained their planned course and speed while being prepared to defend themselves if necessary. When Chinese ships began conducting aggressive maneuvering around the American formation, she worked with the tactical action officer to position American ships to maintain safe distances while continuing their mission. The most dangerous moment came when a Chinese destroyer began approaching the Constellation at high speed on what appeared to be a collision course. Sarah had to make split-second decisions about how to respond, whether to maintain course and risk collision, or to maneuver and potentially appear to back down from Chinese intimidation. Drawing on her training and instincts, Sarah recommended a response that was both firm and measured. The Constellation maintained its course while increasing speed slightly and broadcasting clear warnings to the Chinese ship about the danger of collision. At the same time, she coordinated with other ships in the formation to ensure they were positioned to assist if the situation deteriorated. The Chinese ship veered away at the last moment, having achieved its apparent goal of testing American resolve without actually creating a dangerous situation. The Freedom of Navigation operation was completed successfully, sending a clear message about American commitment to maintaining access to international waters while avoiding any escalation to actual conflict. Captain Morrison's assessment of Sarah's performance during the operation was unequivocal. "Sarah," he said during their debrief, "you demonstrated the kind of judgment and composure that I would expect from officers with twice your experience. You managed a potentially explosive situation with exactly the right combination of firmness and restraint. That's the kind of leadership the Navy needs in today's complex international environment." The deployment continued with increasing responsibilities for Sarah as the international situation remained tense. She found herself regularly briefing senior officers from the Carrier Strike Group on operational planning and intelligence assessments. Her reputation for competence and sound judgment began to spread beyond her own ship to the broader naval community in the Western Pacific. 3 months into the deployment, Sarah received unexpected news that would test her leadership in an entirely different way. The Constellation received orders to respond to a humanitarian crisis in the Philippines, where a major typhoon had devastated several coastal provinces. The ship would be diverted from its normal patrol duties to provide disaster relief assistance, including medical support, transportation of supplies, and coordination with international relief organizations. Humanitarian operations presented challenges very different from military exercises or combat operations. Success was measured not in tactical objectives achieved but in lives saved and communities assisted. The operations required coordination with civilian organizations, foreign governments, and international relief agencies, all while maintaining military discipline and effectiveness. Sarah found herself serving as the primary liaison between the Constellation and the various civilian relief organizations operating in the affected area. This role required diplomatic skills and cultural sensitivity that went far beyond her military training. She had to learn to work with Red Cross officials, United Nations representatives, and Philippine government authorities, each with their own procedures, priorities, and communication styles. The most challenging aspect of the humanitarian operation was managing the emotional impact on the crew. The Constellation's sailors were witnessing human suffering on a scale most had never seen before. Entire villages had been destroyed, families had been separated, and basic infrastructure like clean water and medical care had been completely disrupted. Many of the sailors wanted to do more to help than their official duties allowed. Sarah recognized that maintaining crew morale and focus during humanitarian operations required different leadership approaches than combat operations. She worked with the ship's chaplain and medical officer to provide support for crew members who were struggling emotionally with what they were witnessing. She also found ways to channel the crew's desire to help into productive activities, organizing unofficial collections of personal supplies and coordinating with relief organizations to ensure these donations reached the people who needed them most. One particularly difficult situation arose when the Constellation's medical team was treating a Filipino family whose youngest child had been severely injured in the storm. The child needed surgery that was beyond the capabilities of the ship's medical facilities, but the nearest hospital was several hours away by helicopter and weather conditions made flying dangerous. Sarah found herself coordinating a complex medical evacuation that involved multiple agencies and significant risk. She worked with the ship's medical officer to stabilize the child for transport, coordinated with Philippine authorities to clear airspace and prepare the receiving hospital, and managed communication with the family throughout the crisis. The evacuation was successful, and the child survived surgery and eventually made a full recovery. But the incident highlighted for Sarah the human dimension of naval service that went far beyond military operations. She began to understand that her role as a naval officer was not just about defending American interests but about representing American values and capabilities on the global stage. The humanitarian operation lasted 2 weeks, during which the Constellation and its crew made a significant impact on the relief efforts. When the ship resumed its normal patrol duties, Sarah reflected on how the experience had changed her understanding of naval service. She had seen how military capabilities could be used to save lives and provide hope in the darkest circumstances, and she understood that this was as important as any combat mission she might undertake. As the deployment entered its final months, Sarah received news that would significantly impact her career trajectory. She had been selected for early promotion to lieutenant commander and assignment to the Naval War College for advanced education. This opportunity was typically reserved for the most promising officers and represented a clear indication that the Navy saw her as having significant potential for future leadership positions. Captain Morrison called her to his cabin to discuss the assignment. "Sarah," he said, "this selection is a recognition of your exceptional performance not just on this deployment but throughout your career. The War College assignment will prepare you for more senior leadership positions, but it also means leaving operational assignments for a period of academic study. Are you ready for that transition?" Sarah considered the question carefully. She loved being at sea and serving with operational units, but she also understood that the War College experience was essential for officers who aspired to senior leadership positions. The academic program would broaden her understanding of naval strategy, international relations, and the broader context within which naval operations took place. "Captain," she replied, "I'm ready for the challenge. I understand that effective leadership at senior levels requires more than operational competence, it requires strategic thinking and a broader understanding of how military power supports national objectives. I'm honored to have been selected and committed to making the most of the opportunity." As the Constellation prepared to return to its home port, Sarah began planning for her transition to the Naval War College. She would have a brief leave period to spend with family and Mark before beginning her studies. The deployment had been successful both professionally and personally. She had performed well under challenging circumstances and had grown significantly as a leader and as a person. On the final night of the deployment, as the Constellation sailed toward home, Sarah stood on the bridge watching the stars reflect on the calm Pacific waters. She thought about her father's words about the ocean respecting only those who respected it, and she felt that she had earned that respect through her service. She was no longer the junior officer who had reported aboard 18 months earlier. She was a seasoned naval professional ready for the next phase of her career and the greater responsibilities that lay ahead. Commander Sarah Martinez stood before the imposing brick facade of the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, her promotion to the rank of commander fresh and her understanding of naval strategy about to be fundamentally transformed. The year of academic study ahead would challenge her in ways different from any operational assignment, requiring her to think beyond tactical operations to the broader strategic questions that shaped American naval power. Her first seminar in maritime strategy was taught by Professor David Hartwell, a retired Rear Admiral whose reputation for intellectual rigor was legendary among War College alumni. On the first day of class, he posed a question that would define Sarah's entire academic experience. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've all proven your competence as tactical leaders. The question now is whether you can think strategically. Can you see beyond the immediate operation to understand how military power serves political ends?" Sarah found herself among 24 carefully selected officers from all services, each chosen for demonstrated leadership potential and intellectual capacity. Her classmates included Army colonels who had commanded brigades in Afghanistan, Air Force pilots who had led complex air operations, and Navy captains who had commanded ships and submarines. The diversity of experience and perspective created an intellectual environment unlike anything Sarah had experienced in her operational assignments. The coursework was demanding, requiring her to master complex theoretical frameworks while applying them to real-world strategic challenges. She studied the great naval strategists from Mahan to Corbett, learning how geographic factors, technological capabilities, and political objectives shaped naval strategy across different eras. But, more importantly, she began to understand how modern naval forces fitted into broader American strategic objectives in an increasingly complex international environment. Her thesis project focused on the challenges of maintaining American naval presence in the Western Pacific given China's growing military capabilities and territorial ambitions. The research required her to analyze not just military factors but economic relationships, alliance structures, and domestic political considerations in multiple countries. She spent months studying Chinese military modernization, interviewing intelligence analysts, and developing strategic recommendations that would influence actual policy discussions. Professor Hartwell served as her thesis advisor, pushing her to think beyond conventional approaches to strategic challenges. "Commander Martinez," he said during one of their regular meetings, "your operational experience gives you credibility that pure academics lack, but don't let that experience limit your thinking. The strategies that worked in previous decades may not work in the strategic environment you'll face as a senior officer. Sarah's thesis argued that maintaining American strategic advantage in the Western Pacific would require not just military modernization but a fundamental rethinking of alliance relationships and operational concepts. She proposed new approaches to coalition building, innovative uses of emerging technologies, and strategic communication programs designed to counter Chinese influence operations. Her work caught the attention of senior officials in Washington and established her reputation as a strategic thinker capable of connecting operational realities to policy objectives. During her time at the War College, Sarah also faced important personal decisions. Mark had been promoted to major and assigned to Marine Corps headquarters in Washington, D.C. For the first time in their relationship, they would be stationed near enough to each other to maintain a normal relationship. The proximity allowed them to explore their long-term compatibility beyond the constraints of military separations and deployment schedules. Mark had evolved significantly during their time apart. His own experiences in senior staff positions had given him a deeper understanding of the strategic dimensions of military service, and he had developed an appreciation for Sarah's intellectual capabilities that went beyond respect for her operational competence. Their conversations had grown more sophisticated, covering not just personal topics but strategic questions that affected both their services. On a weekend trip to Boston, as they walked through the historic sites around the harbor, Mark brought up the question that had been implicit in their relationship for years. "Sarah," he said, stopping to face her near the Old North Church, "I've been thinking about our future. We've both proven we can succeed in our careers independently, but I think we could be stronger together. I'm ready to commit to making this work long-term, wherever our careers take us." Sarah felt a mixture of joy and trepidation. She cared deeply for Mark and believed they could build a strong life together, but she also understood the challenges facing dual military couples, particularly when both were pursuing demanding career paths. "Mark," she replied, "I want that too, but we need to be realistic about what it means. We're both likely to face assignments that will separate us again, and we'll both have opportunities that might require difficult choices about career versus relationship." They spent the weekend talking seriously about their future, discussing everything from assignment preferences to family planning to retirement goals. By the time they returned to their respective duties, they had reached an understanding that their relationship was worth the challenges they would face and that they would support each other's career ambitions rather than seeing them as competing priorities. As Sarah's year at the War College neared its end, she received notification of her next assignment, executive officer of the USS Vigilant, a guided missile cruiser based in Norfolk. The assignment was both an honor and a challenge. Cruisers were among the most complex ships in the Navy, carrying sophisticated weapons systems and serving as command and control platforms for large naval formations. As executive officer, she would be second in command and responsible for the day-to-day management of over 400 sailors. Captain Michael Rodriguez had commanded the Vigilant for 18 months when Sarah reported aboard. A submarine officer by background, he had been selected for surface ship command based on his exceptional leadership record and strategic thinking abilities. During Sarah's initial interview, he was direct about his expectations and the challenges ahead. "Commander Martinez," he began, "the Vigilant is scheduled for deployment to the Mediterranean in 6 months as flagship for a multinational task force. This deployment will involve complex coalition operations with naval forces from NATO allies, and will be operating in an environment where tensions with Russia remain high. As my executive officer, you'll be responsible not just for preparing this ship for deployment but for serving as my primary advisor on operational matters." Captain Rodriguez continued, "Your War College background gives you strategic perspective that most exos lack, and your operational experience gives you credibility with the crew. I need you to bridge the gap between strategic objectives and tactical execution. Can you handle that level of responsibility?" Sarah met his gaze directly. "Captain, I understand the challenges. The Vigilance mission will require us to operate effectively within coalition structures while maintaining our own operational standards. I'm prepared to ensure the ship and crew are ready for whatever we face." The next 6 months were a period of intensive preparation unlike anything Sarah had experienced in her career. As executive officer, she was responsible for coordinating the training of multiple departments, ensuring that weapons systems were maintained at peak readiness, and developing the crew into a cohesive team capable of operating effectively under the stress of deployment. The cruiser's complexity required Sarah to master systems and procedures far more sophisticated than anything she had encountered on destroyers or submarines. The ship carried advanced radar systems capable of tracking hundreds of targets simultaneously, missile systems that could engage threats at ranges exceeding 200 miles, and command and control capabilities that allowed it to coordinate operations involving dozens of ships and aircraft. Sarah's approach to preparing the crew emphasized not just technical competence but team cohesion and shared understanding of mission objectives. She instituted regular training sessions where different departments had to work together to solve complex problems, and she personally spent time with every division to understand their capabilities and challenges. One of her most important initiatives was developing junior officer leadership capabilities. The Vigilant carried 12 junior officers, most in their first or second assignments, who would be responsible for leading sailors and managing critical systems during deployment. Sarah created a mentorship program that paired junior officers with senior petty officers, established regular leadership seminars, and provided opportunities for junior officers to practice decision-making in simulated crisis situations. Her efforts were tested during a major training exercise off the Virginia coast. The Vigilant was serving as air defense coordinator for a formation of 8 ships when the exercise controllers simulated a massive air attack involving dozens of incoming missiles and aircraft. Sarah found herself in the Combat Information Center coordinating defensive measures while Captain Rodriguez maintained overall tactical command from the bridge. The simulated attack was more complex than anything the ship had faced before, requiring Sarah to coordinate defensive fires from multiple ships while managing the flow of information between various command centers. At the height of the engagement, the exercise controllers simulated casualties among key personnel, forcing Sarah to reorganize her team while maintaining defensive coverage. Working calmly despite the chaos around her, Sarah managed the defensive engagement while simultaneously training her replacement among the junior officers. When Ensign Patricia Williams had to assume control of a critical defensive system after her supervisor was declared a simulated casualty, Sarah guided her through the procedures while maintaining overall coordination of the defense. The exercise concluded with all simulated threats successfully engaged and all ships in the formation protected. When the after-action review was conducted, the exercise director noted that the Vigilant's performance had been exceptional and specifically commended Sarah's ability to maintain effective command and control while simultaneously developing junior officer capabilities under pressure. Captain Rodriguez's assessment was equally positive. "Sarah," he said during their private debrief, "that exercise demonstrated exactly what I was looking for in an executive officer. You didn't just manage the immediate tactical situation, you used it as an opportunity to develop your people. That's the kind of leadership that builds capable crews and successful ships." As the deployment approached, Sarah faced a personal challenge that tested her ability to balance professional obligations with personal commitments. Mark had been selected for a prestigious assignment with a joint staff position that would advance his career significantly, but the timing conflicted with Sarah's deployment schedule. They would have to choose between spending time together before her deployment and Mark's career opportunity. After considerable discussion, they decided that Mark should accept the assignment. Sarah's deployment would last 6 months regardless, and Mark's career opportunity was too valuable to sacrifice. They would see each other for only a few days before Sarah departed, but they both understood that long-term career success required sometimes making difficult short-term sacrifices. The deployment to the Mediterranean began with the Vigilant serving as flagship for a NATO task force conducting routine patrols and exercises in international waters. Sarah's responsibilities expanded significantly as she found herself coordinating not just with other American ships but with naval forces from Britain, France, Spain, and Italy. Each nation brought different capabilities, procedures, and communication protocols, requiring careful coordination to ensure effective operations. Sarah's strategic education proved invaluable as she worked to understand the political sensitivities and national interests that influenced how different coalition partners approached their missions. She learned to navigate the complex relationships between NATO allies while ensuring that American operational objectives were achieved within the broader coalition framework. The most challenging aspect of the deployment came when the task force was assigned to conduct a show-of-force operation in response to Russian naval exercises near NATO territory. The operation required careful coordination between multiple nations while sending a clear message about NATO resolve without provoking unwanted escalation. Sarah worked closely with Captain Rodriguez to develop an operational plan that would demonstrate coalition unity while maintaining tactical flexibility. The plan involved complex maneuvering by ships from 5 different navies, coordinated air operations, and sophisticated communication procedures that would allow rapid response to any escalation by Russian forces. On the day of the operation, Sarah was at her station in the Combat Information Center before dawn, coordinating final preparations and monitoring intelligence updates. As the NATO task force moved into position, Russian ships and aircraft began responding with their own show of force, creating a tense situation where any miscalculation could lead to unwanted confrontation. Sarah found herself managing communication between the various coalition partners while maintaining awareness of the tactical situation and providing regular updates to higher headquarters. When Russian aircraft began conducting close approaches to coalition ships, she had to coordinate defensive measures while ensuring that all nations understood the rules of engagement and procedures for de-escalation. The operation concluded successfully, with the NATO task force demonstrating effective coalition capabilities while avoiding any incidents that could have escalated tensions. Sarah's coordination had been instrumental in ensuring that complex multinational operations proceeded smoothly despite the challenging political and tactical environment. Captain Rodriguez's assessment of her performance was unequivocal. "Sarah," he said after the operation, "you managed one of the most complex coalition operations I've ever seen with the kind of skill I would expect from officers with significantly more experience. You understood not just the tactical requirements but the political sensitivities that made this operation so challenging." As the deployment progressed, Sarah began receiving unofficial indications that her performance was being noticed at the highest levels of naval leadership. Senior officers visiting the Vigilant invariably requested briefings from her on coalition operations and strategic assessments, and her recommendations were being incorporated into planning for future NATO exercises. 3 months into the deployment, Sarah received notification that would significantly impact her future career path. She had been selected for promotion to captain and assignment to command her own ship. The assignment would come with completion of the current deployment, and she would have only a brief period for command training before assuming responsibility for over 300 sailors and one of the Navy's most capable warships. Captain Rodriguez called her to his cabin to discuss the assignment. "Sarah," he said, "this selection is both recognition of your exceptional performance and a vote of confidence in your potential for even greater leadership responsibilities. Command at sea is the pinnacle of a naval officer's career, but it's also the greatest test of leadership capabilities. Are you ready for that level of responsibility?" Sarah considered the question seriously. Command would mean ultimate responsibility for everything that happened aboard her ship, the safety and welfare of her crew, the successful completion of assigned missions, and the maintenance of Navy standards under all conditions. It was both an honor and a burden that would test every lesson she had learned throughout her career. "Captain," she replied, "I understand the magnitude of the responsibility, and I'm ready for it. Everything I've learned from submarine duty through this deployment has prepared me for this opportunity. I'm honored to have been selected and committed to upholding the highest standards of naval command." As the Vigilant prepared to return home, Sarah reflected on how much she had grown during the deployment. She had successfully managed complex coalition operations, developed her skills as a strategic thinker, and proven her ability to handle the most demanding challenges facing naval officers in the modern international environment. The announcement of her selection for command was met with congratulations from the crew, many of whom had benefited from her mentorship and leadership over the past year. Petty Officer Martinez, a young sailor from Puerto Rico whose career Sarah had helped guide, approached her after the announcement. "Ma'am," he said, "thank you for believing in all of us and showing us what real leadership looks like. We're proud to have served with you, and we know you're going to be an outstanding commanding officer." As the Vigilant sailed toward home, Sarah stood on the bridge watching the familiar coastline of Virginia appear on the horizon. She thought about her father's words about earning the ocean's respect and realized that she had not only earned that respect but was now prepared to help others earn it as well. Command would be her opportunity to shape the next generation of naval leaders while serving her country in one of the most demanding and rewarding positions available to any military officer.
Captain Sarah Martinez stood on the pier in Norfolk, watching as her crew prepared the USS Intrepid for their first major deployment under her command.
18 months had passed since she had assumed command of the guided missile destroyer, and those months had been filled with intensive training, crew development, and the constant challenge of molding 350 individual sailors into a cohesive fighting unit capable of operating effectively in any environment. The deployment ahead would take them to the Indo-Pacific, where growing tensions between regional powers created an environment where every operation carried the potential for escalation. Sarah's ship would be operating as part of a carrier strike group, but with sufficient independence to conduct solo missions requiring the highest levels of tactical competence and strategic judgment. Admiral Patricia Chen, the carrier strike group commander, had specifically requested Sarah's ship for this deployment based on her reputation for exceptional leadership and operational excellence. During their pre-deployment briefing, Admiral Chen had been characteristically direct about her expectations. "Captain Martinez," the Admiral had said, "this deployment will test everything you've learned about command. We'll be operating in an environment where Chinese and North Korean forces are increasingly aggressive, where our allies have their own national interests that don't always align perfectly with ours, and where every tactical decision has potential strategic implications. I need ship commanders who can think independently while remaining integrated with larger operational objectives." Sarah had responded with the confidence that 18 months of successful command had given her. "Admiral, the Intrepid and her crew are ready for whatever missions you assign. We've trained extensively for operations in contested environments, and I'm confident in our ability to execute complex operations while maintaining the diplomatic sensitivity required in the current strategic environment." The months leading up to deployment had been a period of intense preparation that tested every aspect of Sarah's leadership capabilities. She had inherited a crew that was technically competent but lacked the esprit de corps that distinguished truly exceptional naval units. Building that cohesion while simultaneously preparing for deployment had required her to balance demanding training schedules with attention to individual sailor development and unit morale. Sarah's approach to command was built on the leadership principles she had developed throughout her career. Technical excellence was the foundation, but unit success depended on every sailor understanding their role in the larger mission and believing that their contribution mattered. She instituted regular all-hands meetings where she explained not just what the ship was doing but why those activities served broader strategic objectives. One of her most important initiatives was developing a comprehensive professional development program for her junior officers and senior petty officers. Sarah understood that the Navy's future depended on developing the next generation of leaders, and she used every training evolution as an opportunity to challenge her subordinates to think critically and make difficult decisions under pressure. Lieutenant Commander James Park, her executive officer, had initially been skeptical of Sarah's emphasis on education and development. During one of their early conversations, he had questioned whether the time spent on leadership seminars and strategic discussions was taking away from more practical training requirements. "Captain," he had said, "I understand the value of professional development, but we have a limited amount of time to prepare for deployment. Shouldn't we be focusing on the tactical skills and technical competencies that will keep us alive if we find ourselves in combat?" Sarah had used his question as a teaching moment, both for Park and for the other officers present. "XO," she had replied, "technical competence is absolutely essential, and we will never compromise on that. But technical skills alone aren't enough to succeed in the complex environment we're preparing to enter. Our sailors need to understand why their technical skills matter, how their individual contributions affect mission success, and how to make good decisions when they find themselves in situations we haven't specifically trained for." She had continued, "The Chinese and North Korean forces we may face are technically competent too. What will give us the advantage is having sailors who can think creatively, adapt to unexpected situations, and maintain their effectiveness under the stress of combat operations. That kind of mental resilience comes from understanding and believing in what you're fighting for." Park had become one of Sarah's strongest supporters as he observed the results of her leadership approach. The ship's performance during training exercises improved steadily, but, more importantly, crew morale and unit cohesion reached levels that exceeded anything in the ship's recent history. The deployment began with routine operations and exercises, allowing Sarah and her crew to adapt gradually to the operational environment of the Western Pacific. The Intrepid's first independent mission came 3 months into the deployment, when the ship was assigned to conduct a solo patrol in international waters near the Korean peninsula during a period of heightened tensions. Intelligence reports indicated that North Korean forces were planning a major military exercise that could include missile tests and submarine operations designed to intimidate South Korean and American forces. The Intrepid would provide intelligence collection capabilities while demonstrating American resolve through its presence in international waters. Sarah found herself operating independently for the first time since assuming command, responsible for making tactical decisions that could have significant strategic implications. The mission required her to balance multiple objectives: collecting intelligence on North Korean activities, maintaining American freedom of navigation rights, supporting South Korean allies, and avoiding any actions that could provoke unwanted escalation. For 2 weeks, the Intrepid operated in international waters while North Korean forces conducted increasingly aggressive exercises nearby. Sarah's crew tracked submarine movements, monitored communications, and maintained detailed logs of all North Korean military activities. At the same time, they had to be prepared to defend themselves if North Korean forces chose to target American ships. The most challenging moment came when North Korean submarines began conducting aggressive underwater maneuvers near the Intrepid's position. Sarah had to decide whether to maintain her ship's position and demonstrate resolve, or to maneuver to avoid potential confrontation. Intelligence assessments were inconclusive about North Korean intentions. They could have been conducting routine training, testing American resolve, or positioning for actual attack. Drawing on her submarine experience and strategic education, Sarah chose a response that was both firm and measured. She maintained the Intrepid's position in international waters while implementing defensive measures that would protect her ship without appearing provocative. She also coordinated with intelligence assets to ensure that higher headquarters had complete information about North Korean activities and American responses. The crisis resolved when North Korean forces concluded their exercises and returned to port, but Sarah's handling of the situation had been noted by senior officials throughout the chain of command.
Admiral Chen's assessment was particularly positive. Captain Martinez demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment we need from independent commanders operating in contested environments.
She maintained American interests and alliance commitments while avoiding unnecessary escalation. The success of her independent patrol led to increasingly complex and sensitive missions for the Intrepid. Sarah found herself regularly briefing senior officials on intelligence assessments and operational recommendations, and her opinions were being solicited on strategic questions affecting the entire region. 6 months into the deployment, Sarah received orders for the mission that would define her command tour and establish her reputation throughout the Navy. The Intrepid was assigned to lead a multi-ship operation responding to a humanitarian crisis in the Philippines, where a major earthquake had devastated coastal areas and displaced hundreds of thousands of people. The mission would require Sarah to coordinate not just naval operations but joint service cooperation, international relief efforts, and diplomatic coordination with Philippine government officials. As the senior naval officer on scene, she would be responsible for overall coordination of American military assistance while ensuring that relief operations achieved maximum effectiveness. Sarah understood that humanitarian operations required leadership skills different from combat operations but equally challenging in their own way. Success would be measured not in tactical objectives achieved but in lives saved and communities restored. The operation would require cultural sensitivity, diplomatic skills, and the ability to coordinate effectively with civilian organizations whose procedures and priorities differed significantly from military standards. The Intrepid arrived off the Philippines coast to find a situation of almost overwhelming complexity. Multiple government agencies, international relief organizations, and foreign military units were operating in the same area with different command structures, communication systems, and operational objectives. Local infrastructure had been severely damaged, making coordination and communication extremely difficult. Sarah's first priority was establishing effective command and control arrangements that would allow efficient coordination without undermining the autonomous authorities of other organizations. She worked closely with Philippine Navy officers, United Nations officials, and representatives from Red Cross and other relief agencies to develop procedures that maximized efficiency while respecting each organization's independence. Her approach emphasized collaboration rather than military command authority. She positioned the Intrepid and its resources to support relief operations while establishing coordination mechanisms that allowed all organizations to operate effectively. When disagreements arose between different agencies about operational priorities, she served as a mediator, helping to find solutions that served humanitarian objectives while maintaining good relationships between all participants. The most challenging aspect of the operation was managing the emotional impact on her crew. The devastation they witnessed was beyond anything most sailors had experienced, and many crew members were struggling with feelings of helplessness in the face of such massive human suffering. Sarah had to maintain operational effectiveness while providing emotional support for sailors who were working around the clock to save lives and provide assistance. She instituted daily briefings where crew members could discuss what they had seen and share their feelings about the operation. She also worked with the ship's chaplain and medical officer to provide counseling for sailors who were having difficulty coping with the emotional demands of humanitarian operations. One particularly difficult situation arose when the Intrepid's medical team was treating Filipino families whose homes had been completely destroyed and who had lost everything except their lives. Many of the sailors wanted to contribute their own money and possessions to help these families, but military regulations strictly limited personal involvement in relief operations. Sarah found a way to channel her crew's desire to help while maintaining operational discipline. She worked with relief organizations to establish procedures that allowed sailors to contribute to approved relief funds while maintaining the professional distance required for effective military operations. The solution satisfied her crew's need to feel they were making a meaningful contribution while ensuring that personal emotions didn't compromise operational effectiveness. The humanitarian operation lasted 4 weeks, during which the Intrepid and its crew played a crucial role in saving lives and providing assistance to devastated communities. When the operation concluded, Sarah received personal thanks from Philippine government officials, United Nations representatives, and relief organization leaders for her exceptional coordination and leadership.
Admiral Chen's assessment of Sarah's performance was emphatic.
"Captain Martinez," she said, "you demonstrated leadership capabilities that go far beyond normal military operations. You managed one of the most complex humanitarian operations I've ever observed while maintaining the highest standards of military professionalism. That kind of leadership is exactly what the Navy needs as we face increasingly diverse operational challenges." As the deployment neared its end, Sarah began receiving unofficial indications that her performance was being noticed at the highest levels of naval leadership. Senior officers visiting the strike group invariably requested briefings from her, and her operational assessments were being forwarded to Pentagon officials responsible for strategic planning. The deployment's final major operation would test Sarah's capabilities as both a tactical commander and a strategic thinker. The carrier strike group was assigned to conduct a complex multinational exercise involving naval forces from 6 different countries, designed to demonstrate Allied cooperation and interoperability in the face of growing regional threats. As the commander of one of the most capable ships in the exercise, Sarah was assigned responsibility for coordinating air defense operations for the entire multinational force. The exercise would simulate large-scale air and missile attacks while testing the ability of Allied forces to operate effectively together under the stress of combat conditions. The challenge was not just tactical but diplomatic. Each participating nation brought different capabilities, procedures, and political sensitivities that had to be carefully managed to ensure successful operations. Sarah found herself serving as both military coordinator and diplomatic facilitator, working to achieve tactical objectives while maintaining the alliance relationships that were essential to long-term strategic success. The exercise culminated in a complex scenario where Allied forces had to coordinate defensive operations while conducting offensive strikes against simulated enemy targets. Sarah's coordination was instrumental in the successful completion of all exercise objectives, and her performance was noted by senior officials from all participating countries. Following the exercise, Sarah received a message that would mark the beginning of a new phase in her career. She had been selected for promotion to Rear Admiral and assignment to a senior staff position at Pacific Fleet Headquarters. The assignment would require her to transition from operational command to strategic planning and policy development, putting her War College education and operational experience to work at the highest levels of naval leadership. Admiral Chen personally delivered the news during a private meeting aboard the carrier. Sarah, she said, this promotion is recognition of your exceptional performance as a commanding officer, but, more importantly, it's an investment in the Navy's future. The challenges facing our service require leaders who understand both tactical operations and strategic implications. You've proven you can excel at both. The Admiral continued, your new assignment will involve working directly with the Pacific Fleet Commander on some of the most sensitive strategic issues facing our nation. You'll be responsible for developing operational concepts that will guide how the Navy operates in this region for years to come. It's a position of enormous responsibility and enormous opportunity. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and humility as she considered the assignment. Promotion to flag rank was the pinnacle of a naval career, representing recognition of exceptional leadership and the trust of senior officials in her judgment and capabilities. But she also understood that with promotion came greater responsibility not just for immediate operations but for the long-term future of the naval service. Admiral, she replied, I'm honored by the confidence you and other senior leaders have shown in me. I understand that flag rank is not just recognition of past performance but an obligation to serve the Navy and the nation at the highest levels. I'm prepared for that responsibility. As the Intrepid prepared to return home, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From her childhood in San Diego watching her father struggle with the transition from military to civilian life, through her years at the Naval Academy, her submarine tour, her time at the War College, and her command tour, every experience had prepared her for the challenges ahead. On the final night of deployment, as the ship sailed toward home waters, Sarah stood on the bridge watching the stars reflect on the calm Pacific. She thought about the young midshipman who had graduated from Annapolis with dreams of serving her country at sea, and she marveled at the path that had led her to flag rank and positions of strategic responsibility. Lieutenant Rodriguez, one of her junior officers who had developed significantly under her leadership, approached her on the bridge. Captain, he said, the crew wanted me to tell you how honored we've been to serve with you. You've shown all of us what real leadership looks like, and you've made us better sailors and better people. Sarah smiled, thinking about her father's words about leadership being service to others rather than command over them. Thank you, Lieutenant, she replied. But remember that leadership isn't about one person, it's about what we accomplish together. The success of this deployment belongs to every sailor aboard this ship. As the Intrepid approached Norfolk, Sarah prepared for her change of command ceremony and her transition to flag rank. She knew that the challenges ahead would be different from anything she had faced as a commanding officer, requiring her to think strategically about threats and opportunities that would shape American naval power for decades to come. But she also knew that her experiences as a tactical leader, her relationships with sailors at all levels, and her understanding of what motivated people to serve with distinction would guide her as she took on greater responsibilities. The ocean that had called to her as a child had tested her and shaped her, and now it was time to help shape the next generation of naval leaders who would carry on the tradition of service she had been privileged to join. The morning of her change of command ceremony, as Sarah prepared to transfer authority to her relief and begin her new assignment, she received a visit from Admiral Chen. Sarah, the Admiral said, I have one more challenge for you. Next month, you'll be attending a joint service conference where you'll be briefing the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff on Pacific strategy. There will be a SEAL Admiral in the audience who's known for challenging junior officers. When he asks who your CO is, I want you to remember everything that brought you to this moment. Sarah smiled, understanding that the question would be both a test and an opportunity. Admiral, she replied, I know exactly what I'll tell him. As she walked across the quarterdeck for the last time as commanding officer of the Intrepid, Sarah felt the satisfaction of knowing she had earned her place among the Navy's senior leaders through competence, character, and dedication to serving others. The young woman who had once wondered if she belonged at the Naval Academy had become an admiral ready to help shape the future of American naval power.